Souvenir hunters have broken off the little columns. It was all up here around, and it's all broken off. This is all presumptive, no black line. Don't know what it was used for, but it was all in complete destruction. That's the middle room we can see from over here, and this was the place down below where he had his private residence. The stairway that was hidden all the way down so no one could see him. And here's where they found, this is his bath. They found this man and woman in embrace and had been covered by plaster, and so the hair was preserved, the sandals and so on. It's in the museum. And no one knows what happened to the bones. Some people disbelieve that it happened, that Josephus was misinformed. For that matter, where were the bones of the Exodus? Normally bones don't decay unless it's some kind of chemical underground. So there are skeptics, especially those who don't consider Josephus. Some of them think that he was influenced by Christian thought somewhat and pro-Roman. He had to be pro-Roman somewhat, but pretty difficult to contest all that is said to have happened here to be incorrect. But Josephus did give flourishes, but still, though he was an excellent writer, he was the only source of truth of what occurred here. So this is a replica. Now we can go over to the end. We're right up here at this level, and then we'll look down to the other two levels. For him to convince that death was our only escape. And I think we have enough time. I'd like to read the entirety of Eleazar's final oration. So it was done here. Now, in 976, there had to be at least 200 men. You'd be surprised that you could probably put all of those just on all of these rows. These are original. See the black line? Best preserved synagogue. We'll talk about when synagogues were used. And all of this was where the men gathered, maybe 200. My loyal followers, long ago we resolved to serve neither the Romans nor anyone else but only God, who alone is the true and righteous Lord of men. Now the time has come that bids us prove our determination by our deeds. At such a time we must not disgrace ourselves. Hitherto we have never submitted to slavery, even when it brought no danger with it. We must not choose slavery now, and with it penalties that will mean the end of everything if we fall alive into the hands of the Romans. We were the first of all to revolt, and shall be the last to break off the struggle. But I think it is God who has given us the privilege that we can die as noble and free men, unlike others who were unexpectedly defeated. In our case, it is evident that daybreak will end our resistance. But we are free to choose an honorable death with our loved ones. This our enemies cannot prevent. However, earnestly they may pray to take us alive, nor can we defeat them in battle. Let our wives die unabused, our children without knowledge of slavery after that. Let us do each other the ungrudging kindness, preserving our freedom as a glorious winding sheet. But first let our possessions and the whole fortress go up in flames. It will be a bitter blow to the Romans, that I know, to find our persons beyond their reach and nothing left for them to loot. One thing only let us spare, our store of food. It will bear witness when we are dead to the fact that we perished not through want, but because, as we resolved at the beginning, we choose death rather than slavery. If only we all had died before seeing the sacred city utterly destroyed by enemy hands, the holy sanctuary so impiously uprooted. But since our honorable ambition deluded us into thinking that perhaps we should succeed in avenging her of her enemies, and now he all has fled, abandoning us to our fate. Let us at once choose death with honor, and do the kindest thing we can to ourselves, our wives, and children, while it is still possible to show ourselves any kindness. After all, we were born to die, we and those we brought into the world. This even the luckiest must face, but outrage, slavery, and the sight of our wives led away to shame with our children. These are not evils to which man is subject by the laws of nature. Men undergo them through their own cowardice if they have a chance to forestall them by death and still do not take it. We're very proud of our courage, so we revolted from Rome. Now in the final stages they have offered to spare our lives, and we've turned down the offer. Is anyone too blind to see how furious they will be if they take us alive? Pity the young, whose bodies are strong enough to survive the prolonged torture. Pity the not so young, whose old frames will break under such ill usage. A man will see his wife violently carried off. He will hear the voice of the children crying, "Daddy!" and when his hands are so fettered. Come, while our hands are free and can hold the sword, let them do a noble service. Let us die unenslaved by our enemies and leave this world as free men in the company with our wives and children. There was opposition, but finally the majority agreed that there was no other option. They were already breaking through the wall. It was ablaze, and the Romans were confidently sleeping. And then they came, and it was a defeat, not a victory, because all of the food stores there, everything else afire, and they had no one to conquer, no one to take. I don't know, maybe the Romans took the bones to try to take all of the evidence with them to talk about the argument. In any case, this is where it happened, and the best preserved synagogue, pointing to Jerusalem. All synagogues are pointed to Jerusalem, no matter where they are in the world. Same thing happened with Muhammad. He was so influenced by Judaism and Christianity. We'll talk about that a little. And so he had his people pray towards Jerusalem originally, and then changed to later to his hometown. Any questions now about all of this?
So this was a synagogue?
This is the earliest synagogue that's been found. They appeared when they came back from the exile. They couldn't bring the temple, and so synagogue means synagogogein, to gather together. And we know in Ezekiel he had his own house, and so probably they started gathering together in small house synagogues. And so when they came back, they could have that in any city, because they had it started in the exile, and then when they came back, they can have that in their own city. And a temple ultimately was built by, Ezra tells us about it. It was built earlier than Ezra. He didn't arrive till 458. It was finished in 516. When they came back. And so the synagogue became a way of worship that didn't involve sacrifices. They've not sacrificed any animals since the temple was destroyed, because there is no temple standing. And that prayer became a substitute for sacrifice, and synagogue a substitute for the temple. It was so viable that it continued after the rebuilding of the temple, the synagogue. And so the same synagogue that was built by Zerubbabel, grandson of Jehoiakim, the last young king that went into exile before his father, and that was the one that Herod remodeled. It had to be that. Some think there were 3 synagogues, but it couldn't be, because in Haggai, he said people who remembered Solomon's temple were weeping. The others were rejoicing. And he said the desired of all nations is going to come to this temple. So there had to be only 2 temples to fulfill the mission of this Messiah that Haggai prophesied. Okay, let's go on.
It rained up here yesterday, huh?
Yeah. Change going that way. This is the columbarium, it's called, and there were niches inside the stone, only a few left. They were out. It was the post office, according to Yadin, where the carrier pigeons came and roosted. But his assistant, who started the archaeological school at Tel Aviv, departed from him. He called them ashes of soldiers that had died. They cremated them. They didn't cremate. Jewish wouldn't cremate. But so it seems like probably he's right. Instead of carrier pigeons only one direction, but there was a disagreement between the 2. But there's one, there was another one over here. Now let's go on to where they penetrated the wall with their battering. Below it's decayed a lot in 2,000 years. This is where the ram came through. Saw in the film. Where the ram came through of the Romans, and then this is where they This is the entrance room to his public palace. You can see how the plastered stones are there to look like solid stones. And they had to stay here until a proper reception was received. From here they went on into Herod's palace. There was a room where he would have been seated. We will be able to see that. This is one of the 8 towers, and during the time of the ones that lived up here, that was a tanner's office, and he had the various salt pits to tan the leather that would have been used for weapons, for clothes and whatever. And so we can take a look at that, and then we will look at the 2 best mosaics that can be seen from the top, what it was like in his public palace. His private palace was never used for visitors. You can see the columbarium here a little better than where we were, where it's thought that there was either the ashes of Roman soldiers or carrier pigeon roosts.